Alright, we dropped off here at this pop-off valve location. A couple other things I want to talk about while we're here is the fuel lines. One of the first things you got to do is bend those fuel lines up carefully. They will kink on you. One of them's got to be blanked off, and then two of them have got to be mounted through. One of them is fuel supply from the tank, and the other is fuel return to the tank. The one that is blocked off was a vapor line that went to the canister, and I blocked that one off. See the two lines there are ADL'd off to the firewall there, and they come up through the return line, just goes around to the pump, and the supply line is routed through the filter here. This is a standard Volkswagen Rabbit diesel, Jetta, they're all the same. The fuel filter adapter here, and of course that's standard fuel filter on it. See the lines come across here. One of them goes across, the clear line comes across here. Well, it used to be clear in 1980. Comes across here to the input on the pump, and the return line comes off the back of the pump and is returned back to the tank. That does a bunch of good, including heat up the fuel in the tank a little bit while you're driving. This T-line in here is for the boost gauge. It's inside the cockpit there. The engine itself was taken out, was overhauled, head was rebuilt. It is a turbo head. The pump was rebuilt by Kansas City Diesel. I live here in Kansas City. I rebuilt the injectors. They don't have time to do them correctly in a shop. If you want your injectors done correctly, you have to do them yourself. They just takes too much time for a shop to do them. They'll throw new nozzles in them for you. They will not rebuild them. They don't have time. Let me get the light on here so you can see down here at the bottom. Everybody's got questions on how you run your pulley belts. This is how I've done it 15 different ways, and this is the way that comes up best for this one. Since I don't have air conditioning on this little car, it's a rag top. There's no point in putting air in it. The water pump driven directly off the crankshaft. There's no adjustment for it. If you got the correct size pulleys and the correct belt, it's really tough to get the belt on there the first time, and then it runs without tension. That belt's been on there for thousands and thousands of miles, no problem. And it pulls it's got enough contact area to pull the pump just fine. And the other belt just drives the alternator, and it's got a pretty good adjustment on it. It works just fine. So that was the end of that. You can kind of see underneath here, if I get the light just right, the drain line for the turbo. It has to go behind the alternator. Typically speaking, you would mount the alternator closer to the block, but when you have a turbo in the return line, you have to space out the alternator to make it work. Alright, explain about the radiator. Let me see what else we got here. It's about the 15th time I've made this video, by the way. Neighbors' dogs keep barking, so I guess go get a BB gun or something, I don't know. The wiring harness in this vehicle was completely taken all apart. Every wire and connector that was not needed for the diesel engine was taken off and cleaned up. Then I rewrapped the harness back with the original wrapping so it looks like it came there from the factory. That red wire sticking out there at the back is the glow plug supply line. It comes from the relay that's underneath the dash. So there's the fuse box for it. The wire comes out the other side, goes down to the engine, and is connected to the glow plugs. I don't know if you can actually see them down inside here or not. There's a couple of them in there. You can see it. They're just connected together with a copper bar. Like I said, I will have to make a separate video on glow plugs. Everybody's got trouble with glow plugs, so we'll see if we can't fix that once and for all. This entire engine configuration, the longitudinal engine configuration here, this came standard in the Audi 80, early Audi 90s, the VW Quantums, the Foxes. There's a bunch of them that use this same one. All VW engines don't go sideways, whatever they call it, transverse. So what I'm trying to tell you is this radiator and the engine and the radiator hoses, and not the motor mount so much because that's one of Dave Kerr's motor mounts down there in the bottom, but pretty much all this stuff is exactly the same as it was in the Volkswagen, as long as you use this radiator. If you try to use a Mustang radiator or something, well, then you wind up running hoses all over. But if you use this radiator with this engine and this vehicle, you can use stock hoses, and that's what I do. This upper hose is out of an Audi 80. It is still available brand new. The lower hose down there, unfortunately, is no longer available. There was two left in the country. The original hoses, I bought them both. One of them is right here, and the other one went out in a customer's conversion. So that's the end of that. Now you got to cut them and splice them. So, which is no big deal. It's just a lot neater to use one piece hose. One of the tougher pieces to find for this conversion is, if it's a turbo, is that one right there, the angled oil filter adapter. This came off a Turbo Diesel Quantum. You can make one. Well, I can't say you can make one, but you can modify one. But if you do, you have to be very, very careful about how you drill and tap those fittings for the top. You can see in the back there I have the Samurai oil pressure switch, and then I have the turbo line. That's the supply line for the turbo, and then the other one is the oil temperature sender that goes to the gauges up in the cockpit. Those are tough to put in by hand. They're really tough because those are not tapered threads. That's a 10 millimeter by 1 millimeter bolt thread. If it's not perfectly straight, they will leak. Ask me how I know. Alright, below that we have a Volvo oil cooler sandwich. Guess you can see it better like that. I don't like that oil to water heat exchanger that Volkswagen uses. I think that's junk science. I do. So an air to oil heat exchanger is what everybody else uses and what I used to. Airplanes and stuff, they don't use that stupid crap. Standard oil filter, regular VW oil filter. What I'm trying to tell you is all this stuff is standard. There's nothing special. Once you get this thing built, there's nothing special to it. You can see the hard lines that I've bent that go from that sandwich underneath the steering column, over the top of the frame, and under the lower radiator hose, and don't touch anything. They're hooked to the regular standard Volvo flex lines that go to the Volvo oil coolers mounted underneath the radiator. You can see that one's got a little leak right there dripping on the pan. I'll have to take that off, tighten it up. You can't get it from here. I got to remove the line to get to it. That's alright. Take a few minutes. That radiator reservoir, that's out of an A3 Jetta also. I used the bracket and everything. I just welded the bracket to that existing structure and hooked it on there, painted it green. It looks like it's always been here. Let's see what else we got here. These goofy looking wires here, I don't know if I talked about this. These are off that, these are the sensor. This is the sensor. And these are the wires that lead to the tiny tack inside. The tiny tack reads the vibrations, the pulses of this line, and it comes up directly inside here. So it's an accurate tack no matter what. So it's pretty fun. They're cheap, American made, they work great. You see the wires are just routed on. It's just a temporary installation. Well, I tried to find the correct tire size and whatnot for it. So that gives you a good view of the fans. Like I said, a 12-incher and 10-incher, it's all you got room for. You can't really see the switch. Maybe you can see it down there at the very bottom. But I just use a standard VW switch in the bottom of that thing. Works great. So anyway, we got about a minute left here. Let me cut this video here off, and then I'll start another video from the interior. Back in a minute.